listening to The Bucket List.
Good morning, it's The Bucket List. This morning we are chatting with Gerard Whately from SEN, today known as 1377 Winx Plus. Hello, Gerard. Welcome to The Bucket List.
Diana, it's an exciting development, isn't it? Lovely to be with you.
Oh, thank you. It is, because Phar Lap raced in the 1930s. It's almost 100 years since we've had a wonderful Australian champion racehorse that the world knew, and Winx has done that. But when you think about it, we've also been blessed because we as a generation, we've seen Maccabi Diva win 3 Melbourne Cups, Black Caviar 25 races straight unbeaten, and he went overseas, and now Winx. How long do you think it'll be before we see another horse like one of those three? Because we've just been so fortunate to see 3 wonderful horses.
So after the Black Caviar phase, and I wrote the book which we tagged The Horse of a Lifetime, I presumed that I would never see another horse win such a stretch of races like that again. And it was less than a decade, and it not only happened again, but it was furthered. So it has been remarkable. In fact, if you can break it down from a certain point of view around mares and put together Sunline, who was a phenomenal horse out of New Zealand who captured hearts, and then Maccabi Diva, who'd done something that had never been done before. And there's the presumption that 3 Melbourne Cups wouldn't be possible again. And Black Caviar, who had the perfect career across 25 starts. And then I think there's sort of a protection that lies around Phar Lap in the same way a protection lies around Don Bradman. And yet we have a living example of, if not superior, then certainly the equal to Phar Lap in what Winx has been able to do. So I would sit here and say we will never see a day like this again, and yet recent history says that we might. So no, this is the end of the most astonishing chapter.
Why is it Australian horses that seem to have this influence and not British, American or South American horses? Is it possibly that they are just freaks, Usain Bolt types, or is it just, they're head and shoulders above a kind of a meagre rest of the pack? I
think that there's always been great horses come out of Australia. How they stack up against what happens in England is a really thorough debate at the moment. So when Black Caviar was running, there was a horse called Frankel who was on an unbeaten run through his career as well. We all went to Royal Ascot. I think we all went a bit snippy, to be honest, that because we had this unbeaten champion, they were putting forward theirs. And then we all saw Frankel. And I think most of us that day believed that that's the best horse that we'd ever seen. But I do think what Winx is doing has very strong echoes of Frankel. Where I think the differentiation is we treat our horses in Australia like heroes. In fact, we do humanise them to a great degree, and including nicknames and the like. And we embrace them in a way where racing is the foundation sport of Australia. It's got all the right roguish elements which have appealed to Australians throughout the year. So they're greater social figures, they're greater cultural figures in Australia than they are the rest of the way around the world. And I think you could make a pretty strong case to say that we love our champion horses in a way that doesn't happen anywhere else around the world. They're revered and admired, but not loved in the same way.
Yeah, I can only think of probably 2 in the UK, obviously Red Rum and Desert Orchid, probably, and they were jumpers instead of flat races.
And there's probably a level of affection that is one there that relates to bravery and stamina. Yeah, so we make them cultural characters, and I think that is unique.
Yeah. Winx has won 4 Cox Plates and she's going to retire. Do you think she could go on and win a 5th Cox Plate?
I do. And I never imagined we'd see a horse capable of winning 4. And yet by the time we got there was a sense of inevitability about it. There's no deterioration in Winx's physical capacities at the moment, which is startling. And she's on a 4-year winning sequence. There's actually no reason to retire her other than caution. And that's a very sound idea, is you don't want to race the horse into the ground. I think there would be, because of how she is loved, if you ran her to the point where something went wrong or she got beaten and it looked like you were just being greedy, there's nothing left to prove, which is right. There's always more to achieve in sport. But I think if they spelled her after today's run and brought her back in the spring again, I imagine that she would win a 5th Cox Plate, and I imagine by the day we got there in October, we would all be sure that she was going to. And that's what part of the mystique and part of the glorious mystery around her is why. Why has she not tailed off at all? I think you could make the case that she is at the absolute peak of her powers at the moment.
Well, she's going to stud, so she needs a boyfriend.
Many boyfriends, by the way. Yeah.
Schnitzel, Deep Impact, I Am Invincible, they're all available. In your mind, Gerard, who do you think would make the greatest mate for Winx when she goes to stud, and what stallion do you think she should go for?
She's not mine, so I don't have to worry about the logistics, but I would take her to Frankel, the great English champion.
That would be interesting.
Just because.
Yeah.
Just because.
You can, yeah.
Why wouldn't you bring the two great horses of the era together? The caution that sits over this, and it's sort of well recognised, is the great mares almost never produce good foals. And there's all sorts of theories that abound about these as all the energies are expended on the racetrack. And I'm not sure whether any of that makes any sense whatsoever, but Black Caviar's foals haven't been particularly good so far. Maccabi Divas have been failures. Sunlines were failures. So I'm a little bit in the camp of she should, have a great retirement. But I'm never one for round off their racecourse deeds quickly to send to stud because it's so imprecise.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and they'll create great attention, just like they did Black Caviar's first foal ran on New Year's Day, and all the same people had their Black Caviar caps on, all their merchandise from there. It was just the extension of the journey, which is beautiful in its own way, but you would never, I don't think you would cut the racing achievement short to chase at stud.
How do you compare Winx to all the other great Australian champions, Gerard?
Yeah, I think she sits with Phar Lap. I think you can make a compelling case that her CV is grander than Phar Lap's. The rider to it is she didn't go overseas. So I think, Black Caviar's crowning moment is going to Royal Ascot, and the day that everything goes wrong, she's still able to win in front of the Queen, and the Queen comes down and pats her. That's such a strong part of her legacy and her story. Phar Lap went to the great race of the world at the time, the Agua Caliente, and think about the logistical challenges that represented. And he died on the road. So I think those are really strong moments that they chose not to do with Winx for reasons of creating history at home. I think it's half a pity. I think she is the horse who would have won anywhere in the world. I think she would have won in France. I think she would have won in Japan. She would have won in Hong Kong. She certainly would have won at Royal Ascot. But you create these grand records at home. You don't have 4 Cox Plates if she travels around the world. You prioritise elsewhere. So, yeah, she handsomely sits with Phar Lap, and then maybe in a generation's time we'll be able to go. So if you're picking the order, which one? I think recency bias would say most people at the moment will go Winx over Phar Lap, but Phar Lap has endured for so long that it'll be interesting to see how that holds in a decade.
Wow. Tell me, which race was it to you that stood out, that made you realise that she really is super special?
The Cox Plates are the second Cox Plate where she trounced Hartnell. So this was built as a match race. It's the two great horses of the day. And for a brief moment, they were together down past the school. And then Winx just absolutely left him behind. And it was visually shocking that she could do that. And from there, her dominance has barely been touched. Her first Cox Plate was a brilliant win, but it was the second Cox Plate where you went, this horse is a generational talent.
Yeah. So, Gerard, in your mind, if trainer Chris Waller decided to target her for one of the more major sprint races in Australia, or alternatively tackle the Melbourne Cup with her, do you think she could have won them?
Yeah, I think she's one of those rare horses that whatever Chris chose, she would have succeeded at. So if he'd given her a sprinting preparation to win the TJ Smith or the Newmarket, she would have done that first up. The Melbourne Cup is the most interesting. If early on they had a crack at a Melbourne Cup before weight became an issue, I think she would have won it. If after that first Cox Plate she'd been on a campaign where they stretched her out for that one go with a lightweight, I think she would have won the Melbourne Cup, as she's just such a pliable horse. As every challenge that's put to her, she relaxes in races. She's got a devastating sprint. She could grind big horses down. Yeah, In the same way that Phar Lap won everything because those were the times. You ran in everything. You ran on the 4 days of the Melbourne Cup Carnival. If those were the times, she would have won everything that Chris Waller had set her for.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing your calls later today, Gerard.
Thanks, Diana. It'll be a great day to be a part of.
It's going to be amazing. Thank you so much, Gerard Whately on the bucket list on 1377 Winx Plus.
Remember, stay tuned for the rest of the day. It is going to be live horse racing for the rest of the afternoon with Gerard and the team, live from Randwick.